Hi everyone, welcome to my review of A Bug's Life from 1998. So yes, the second Pixar feature film and directed by John Lasseter. So yes, here we are to talk about animation once again, and yeah, this is a film, of course, a very interesting Pixar work. One that's not really, I wouldn't say it's too loved really in the grand scheme of things. It's not really maybe ranked as high as many other Pixar films. It's not really. At least it kind of seems to me, not really considered one of their best works, perhaps. And yeah, it's a film that I saw quite a few times as a kid. Not one of my favourites, as a kid. And I wanted to revisit this, of course, and review it. So yes, this second Pixar feature. So it's very interesting, of course, following up. Toy Story, and it's something that I'm not going to compare this to Toy Story at all, because it's very pointless, I think, to kind of do that, and it is, of course, very different, very different to really any Pixar film, and of course focusing on insects. So that's very interesting, of course, and yeah, there won't be any spoilers in this review. So if you haven't seen this film, certainly you don't need to worry, about me kind of giving away big events, perhaps, and kind of discussing them in detail. This is going to be a very very kind of not a brief review, but yeah, kind of not one that's too in depth, perhaps. And I just wanted to give my thoughts, my overall thoughts on this film. And yeah, it's a film. Once again, I watched on Disney Plus, so I don't have the Blu-ray to kind of show. But I will, of course, be collecting all these films eventually. This is something that I did say that even though I've got Disney Plus currently, I think I will definitely, of course, be collecting all the Disney features, and yeah, specifically Pixar films. Hopefully, eventually I will have all of them in my collection. Yes, as I say, I did watch this a few times as a kid, but actually, this rewatch, it's kind of a film that's overall grown on me, actually, and I do like this more, and it's kind of reminding me about different things, and at the same time, there's definitely things I picked up on this time that I maybe didn't really remember about the film, and it's actually got a lot of depth, this film, in places, and it's got some real interesting parallels, actually. This whole kind of exploration of colonialism, it's something that's very interesting, and I think the way in which the basic plot kind of concerns these this colony of ants, and of course they give up their food, or a certain amount of food, to these grasshoppers, and the main grasshopper being Hopper, and he is basically the villain of the film, and leading all these grasshoppers, of course. And yes, I think the first act, for the record, really is great, and it really sets up this whole kind of world, this whole narrative, so well. This is very clear storytelling here, and it's such a great kind of first act that it just kind of gets me invested in these different characters, and it kind of sets up the story so well. And this whole kind of the threat, and the way they kind of come in at first, these grasshoppers, and just the way that's kind of built up is so quite stunning, actually. And I love the kind of the music as well, and the first kind of shots of the film, showing just from far out there and kind of zooming into this, and under the tree, of course, it's all kind of very much its own little world, and I love that about the film. And I think it's very, it really captures, this kind of this group of characters so well, and this world that's created is very impressive. But we have a highly, entertaining, I feel, and very relatable protagonist here, Flick, and he is this ant, of course. And Flick is voiced by Dave Foley, and yes, something that this character is so interesting here, and I think it's great how they kind of make him this kind of relatable, bumbling, character, one who's very clumsy, but of course he is an inventor, and kind of the irony to his character as well, in the way that everyone else regards him, and it's really such a hilarious kind of first act, and the different things that happen. Of course, a very big event, which I won't kind of get into specifically, kind of leads to him being sent, or going off to kind of find help, of course, for these ants, of course, eventually, very early on, of course, coming across this circus group, these travelling players, of course, and different insects here that are very varied, you know, in kind of characteristics, and you know, of course, different personalities, you know, of these different insects. Of course, it's very, very interesting. I think it's great to kind of see the kind of dynamics, you know, when they're introduced. And of course, this film is really a sort of great comedy at times, and I think it's great how, you know, it really kind of keeps this up. I feel throughout most of the film, and of course, at the same time, you know, I got really invested in these characters. I think there could have been more, you know, in way of developing the different characters in the film. I feel it's definitely not, you know, a film with masterful characters. I feel, you know, it's not some of the, you know, the best, for example, Pixar characters, but it really makes for such an enjoyable, you know, kind of array of different you know, personalities, and the different moments between these, you know, these kind of main circus insects, of course, and the way, of course, the flick, you know, kind of recruits these in very interesting ways. You know, the way in which this narrative plays out, you know, it could be considered predictable at times, but you know, on the other hand, it's kind of very unique at times as well, and I love the kind of way in which these characters all come together. And it has been compared to you know, a number of different films in its basic, you know, outline at least. You know, of course, Seventh Samurai, you know, has been cited to kind of as an influence for this film. You know, kind of as a similar kind of you know, outline, you know, story. You know, I think it's very interesting because, of course, you know, this character who kind of recruits these different you know, warriors, perhaps, who, you know, are stronger than you know, the main those in need, perhaps, and you know, this whole kind of the parallels here. You know, this kind of village, perhaps, who are in need of you know, aid in kind of fending off, perhaps, other different, you know, threat, perhaps. So of course, it's very similar, you know, in the way of the bandits and stuff. You know, the samurai, you know, in Seven Samurai, of course. And yes, you know, it makes for such an entertaining kind of narrative. I feel, and it's something that I could really, I can get something from, you know, every single, you know, act of this film. I think kind of, you know, is a slightly bit maybe flat in the kind of middle portion of the film, and even the final act. You know, it's not. I think really the first, you know, 20 minutes or so is kind of the best or the most investing parts of the film, and I think really overall the first half I did prefer. You know, really this was consistently great, really, and I think overall I don't quite think it's you know, a great film, but it is very close. You know, I think it's highly entertaining throughout, regardless maybe of the different you know, kind of peaks and kind of, you know, different moments that are maybe not so great in my opinion, but you know, I think it really hasn't got too many kind of flaws, you know, I think, and it's very you know, kind of charming, this film, and I think the comedy, you know, really is consistent, and just these interesting characters, lovable characters, really. Again, I don't think there's too much in the way of character development for certain, you know, characters in the film, but regardless, they're always kind of entertaining, and of course, the villain as well, I think is really really entertaining, you know, Hopper, and yeah, it's just, you know, this film, you know, is great in its visual storytelling. I think there are some really wowing moments in this film. Actually, for me, this is actually one of the best, you know, looking Pixar films. I know a lot of people would disagree with that, but I think this is wonderful. And to be quite honest, I do, you know, overall much prefer, you know, these early Pixar, these first Pixar films in their kind of visuals. I think it's a kind of the perfect blend of, you know, of this, you know, really kind of clean looking, you know, very colourful looking, you know, image to kind of with this kind of fantastical feeling to the visuals, and the sense of wonder, you know, really is very strong here in these kind of various Pixar films. Then I think, you know, to very more recent Pixar works, and I think that's just the kind of way in which, you know, I'm drawn to these ones more, perhaps in their visuals. I think this is really stunning, this film to look at. And I think the colours, the way in which these characters are designed, you know, very interesting indeed. How this is not kind of talks about more in its animation. You know, it really is stunning. It really is. And I think the environments and just the creative ways in which, you know, these insects, of course, traverse the landscapes, and you know, just seeing, of course, everything being big to them, you know, it's just really the way in which it's done is so good, and of course one of the things in relation to that is kind of this bird, this kind of appears to them, of course, you know, in regards you know, to their sight, of course, and their perspective, you know, as a massive you know, giant figure, of course, and it's just great to kind of see, and very kind of enjoyable here in the way in which this is kind of done, and I think it's great kind of sequences, you know, of action in this film as well, and there is some flat moments maybe, as I say, in the middle portion, but I think the final act in its action, you know, is definitely great, and yes, you know, Princess Atta, voiced by Louis-Dreyfus, you know, she is a really enjoyable character, and I love the dynamic between, you know, Princess Atta and of course Flick, and the way in which you know, it's kind of very maybe you don't think it's going to play out in certain ways, but it is, you know, it's very satisfying, you know, in different places as well, and yeah, it's just a great kind of opening act in particular, and I think this really draws me in to this world. You know, I think these characters, as I say, these characters, you know, aren't some of my favourite characters perhaps, although I really, you know, really like some of them, and do love, you know, Flick, you know, Princess Atta, Dot as well, you know, very enjoyable, and just the way in which these kind of characters are set up is really compelling, and of course the Queen as well, you know, really great character as well, but you know, it's got some flaws, and I think it does kind of suffer, you know, after that first act, you know, and also, you know, particularly after the first half of the film, it's not quite as compelling for me, you know, simply, and it's not really, I don't think it really kind of regains that initial kind of you know, excitement, and I think the way in which it compelled me, perhaps, but really it remains a highly enjoyable film throughout. You know, the narrative, it's a really charming one. This has got some real threatening moments, you know, very you know, scary moments perhaps as well, but it remains this kind of mostly upbeat adventure, you know, very simple story, but it has got some really creative, you know, moments, and the parallels as well. These themes that are explored in the film, you know, actually, you know, it's very interesting to see, you know, because I didn't really pick up on these perhaps when I was younger. So it's great to kind of to see these, you know, different kind of, you know, the symbolism perhaps, and it's really interesting. This one, I think it's very investing. You know, it's quite emotional in places, and just a very enjoyable film. Really, I loved the majority of the film in some regard, and I think this is very close to being a great Pixar film, and it's very much just under that mark for me overall, because it did have quite a few moments that just weren't as compelling as the film went on, to the initial kind of buzz, the excitement, but really this is a very impressive Pixar film, and I think it's another one that really I loved. So yes, taking everything into account, you know, from the visuals to the characters, of course, the score as well, by Randy Newman, which is great stuff. You know, once again here, you know, taking all this into account, also, you know, factoring in the kind of the flaws, you know, the slight flaws I have, you know, especially after that first half of the film, the fact that it didn't quite go the kind of to the special perhaps you know, level of Pixar you know, quality. You know, I think taking everything into account, you know, my final rating for this film is a very high 89%. So yes, very high score for me. Again, not a lot of people you know, love this film. I actually do. I do love this film overall, you could say, and I think there are some moments that I don't love perhaps, but overall as an experience, just seeing this quite, you know, quite an epic film, you know, just this very at the same time light-hearted film, you know, one that's very adventurous, you know, it's got this kind of emotional moments, and the moments of threat, you know, ones that really you know, get me invested as well, but you know, it's kind of you know, it's a really interesting blend here, you know, of this kind of these different you know, tones perhaps, you know, the comedy there never really overtakes, it never goes too far. It's just something that I think you know, at the same time, as you know, as much as the comedy you know, does work, mostly I think the characters could have been you know, developed a bit more, some of these characters, and just these you know, the dynamics, of course, between the different characters, you know, could have been even greater, and I would have given this you know, higher score. And of course, the second half has some moments, you know, an overall it isn't quite as compelling to me, I think, but a really impressive film here. It's true greatness in this film, and I think this is a wonderful film, visually, and just what it kind of says in its narrative, and I think it's a really investing film. I think just a highly entertaining one. Mostly throughout, and I think it's not one of my favourite Pixar's, but I do love this film. I like it more than I've ever done, really. A great rewatch, of course, and just a wonderful little film here. And of course, as I say, I've not been comparing this to Toy Story. We'll get to that. Of course, we have never talked on this channel about any of the Toy Story films. Of course, review form, perhaps. I have much to say about. Well, I've never seen the fourth yet, but of course the trilogy of Toy Story, and eventually I will get to as well Toy Story 4. But I didn't want to compare this film to Toy Story. I don't think there's a comparison. I don't really think there's much point. It's a very different film, and it shouldn't be judged on kind of leading following on from Toy Story, because it's not really anything like Toy Story, of course, and yes, it's something that it's its own thing, and it's a very unique film. Of course, there's not been too many films about kind of insects in this sense. Of course, Ants was released the same year, which is very interesting. But yes, there hasn't been too many films exploring insects and their life, of course. Animated films, so very unique, and I think it's a really enjoyable film. Film that I loved really overall, and just a very joyous film at times, but it has some really threatening moments, and it's something that I really you can take seriously, you can get behind, at least I feel, and very underappreciated maybe Pixar work, I feel, and again, not one of my favourites or anything, but it is a really impressive film. Once again, I do think this is another film that really is a very impressive piece of animation from Pixar, and yes, just great to see the sense of wonder to the film, the adventure feel, the spirit. It really has a kind of a lovely spirit and message, of course, as well, and yes, just highly entertaining in my opinion. So yes, tell me your thoughts. Be very interested. Perhaps one of the more interesting Pixars to talk about, to kind of see the response to, because again, maybe it doesn't get too much attention. I think this is really some impressive stuff here, and I think it'd be great to know what you think of this film, and just some discussions on Pixar, and animation, and as always, simply cinema, of course. So yes, I look forward to reviewing more Pixar works. Recently, of course, I did Monsters Inc. and of course, continuing these Pixar films and animation, of course. Once again, so yes, tell me your thoughts, and as always, take care, and yes, thanks for watching.